Vanya was always seen as someone who never reached their full potential. He and Marina had been neighbors since childhood, and from the first grade onwards, he would carry her briefcase to and from school in silence. Marina would often tease and question Vanya about his silence, to which he would simply sniff and ask what he should say. Marina would laugh and suggest he should just stay quiet. Vanya continued to remain silent, only making his presence known by sniffing louder whenever Marina would attract attention with other guys as they grew older. Vanya's mother would sigh and urge him to find a nice girl for himself, but he would just continue to sniff and faithfully accompany Marina wherever she went. Even when Marina would get angry and throw fists at him, telling him to leave her alone and stop scaring off her potential suitors, Vanya would simply reply that those guys were no good for her. But then, Vanya was drafted into the army, and things became tough for him. He immersed himself in physical training to keep busy and distract himself from thoughts of Marina. When he returned from his service, he looked remarkably handsome, like a model from a magazine. Girls noticed him and showed interest, but his heart still longed for Marina. And Marina felt joy as well upon seeing Vanya's transformation. She had a suspicion that she might be pregnant, though she wasn't entirely sure. 2 weeks prior, she had a risky encounter where protection wasn't used. This was where Vanya came in handy. It only took a minute to seduce him, especially now that he looked like a real man. They repeated the encounter another time, and a month later, Marina confessed to Vanya that she might be late. And Vanya, he was filled with joy. He couldn't believe how happy he was. His mother had screamed and cried, insisting, "It's not your child, mark my words, it's not. Don't ruin your life, don't marry her." But Ivan had always been characterized by a stubbornness that couldn't be shaken. So his mother reluctantly accepted the situation and began to prepare for the wedding. Marinka gave birth to a beautiful little girl. Vanya lovingly rocked her in his arms, washed her diapers, and cooked porridge for her. But Marinka was exhausted, desperately in need of rest. She would ask a neighbor to look after Sonia during the night, while she went out to bars and restaurants to unwind. Every morning, Marinka would return and fall asleep, too tired to take care of her daughter. Vanya knew the truth, but he chose to keep silent. He feared that if Marinka found out, she would take their daughter away, and he couldn't bear the thought of never seeing Sonia again. Gradually, Marinka seemed to calm down. She stopped going out at night, and Vanya felt a sense of relief. He assured his mother that things were improving, but she only shook her head in disbelief. Vanya's mother, without fully understanding why, grew deeply attached to Sonika. Despite the doubts that lingered, she couldn't help but love such an angelic child. When Vanya was at work during the night, his mother would try to take care of her granddaughter, determined not to let Marinka neglect her. She believed that it was not the biological father, but the one who raised the child that truly mattered. She made this decision and found solace in it, devoting all her love to Sonika. One day, Vanya returned home from work to find Marinka sitting with a suitcase in front of her. His heart felt as if it had been stabbed, and she looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Forgive me, Vanechka," she said. "You know I never loved you before, but now I do. I love you so much that it burns in my chest. I'm leaving you. I'm going to him, he's waiting for me, but I'm going to take Sonichka with me." Vanya stared at her, deep in thought, for a prolonged moment. Then, in a calm tone, he spoke. "I will not allow you to take Sonia. It doesn't make sense to expose a child to such a place. I'll handle things on my own." Marinka jumped up in disbelief, exclaiming, "What do you mean you won't give her away? Sonia is our daughter. I can't be without her." Vanya's frustration boiled over, causing him to pound his fist on the table, causing one of its legs to break. "If you insist on staying, then leave. I will not let you subject our daughter to that kind of environment." Marinka, though frightened by Vanya's unexpected outburst, relentlessly attempted to reason with him. Yet the intensity of his gaze drove her out into the street, where she hastily hailed a cab without looking back. Left alone, Vanya sat in silence for a while. Eventually, he rose from his seat and made his way to his mother's house. As soon as he opened the door, little Sonechka eagerly rushed into his arms. "Daddy's here," she joyfully exclaimed. Mother's instincts immediately kicked in when she sensed that something was amiss. "Where's Marinka?" she asked anxiously. Urging her daughter, Sonechka, to pack her toys in her backpack, she added, "We'll be going home soon." The little girl scurried away, while Vanya exchanged a concerned glance with his mother. "She's gone," Vanya replied, his voice filled with worry. "Where did she go? Why? Vanya, why do I have to pry every word out of you?" His mother demanded, frustration evident in her voice. "I don't know where she went, but I do know she left with her boyfriend," Vanya explained. As his mother took a seat, she seemed to collapse under the weight of the news. "What boyfriend? And you're telling me this so calmly? What about Sonechka?" she questioned, her voice laced with desperation. "I didn't give Sonechka away, I promise. Will you help me?" Vanya pleaded. "Yes, I'll help you, of course. But how can we find her?" his mother asked, concern etched on her face. "Well, she said she never loved me, that she had a burning in her chest." Vanya trailed off. "I wish I knew where she was feeling that burning," his mother exclaimed, exasperated. Just then, Sonechka entered the kitchen. "Daddy, I'm ready," she said softly. "That's good. Now we'll go home, and tomorrow is Daddy's day off. We can go to the park and ride the merry-go-round," Vanya said, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Hooray! And what about Mom?" Sonechka asked innocently. "Mom had to leave for work. She's on a business trip," Vanya's mother replied, masking her sadness. Sonechka initially felt upset, but quickly found a silver lining. "So I can have Mom's ice cream, right?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. Vanya's mother, who had just wiped away her tears, couldn't help but laugh. "Well, you're quite clever, Sonia," she exclaimed. As they prepared to leave, Vanya's mother gently touched his arm, concern etched on her face. "Vanya, what are you going to do? Are you considering a divorce?" she inquired. "Yes, I've had enough," Vanya affirmed, his frustration evident. "Good. Katusha asked about you again," his mother started. "Mom, please, let's not revisit the past," Vanya interrupted, not wanting to dwell on old wounds. "I'll keep my mouth shut," then his mother conceded, understanding his reluctance. Vanya placed Sonechka in the car, took the driver's seat, and drove away from the yard. Along the way, thoughts of Katya unexpectedly crossed his mind. Katya was the daughter of a friend of his mother who had passed away, leaving Katya alone at just 18 years old. She was small and unassuming, like a gray mouse, remaining invisible in the background. Some people have a tendency to stay in the shadows, perhaps out of insecurity or habit, never raising their voices. Katya was one of those people. Even as children, she never joined in the lively group activities, always observing from the sidelines. Vanya tried, but was unable to recall her face. Of course, she was far from Marinka's beauty. Vanya and Sonia began living together, although Vanya's mother, Alla Stepanovna, offered them a lot of help. Alla Stepanovna had recently retired, giving her ample free time. Initially, Sonia inquired about her own mother, but eventually stopped. Vanya seemed to settle down and grow accustomed to his solitude. He left his job and started his own small business, which surprisingly took off smoothly. People recognized Ivan as an honest man who always kept his word and gladly sought out his services. 2 years passed. One Sunday afternoon, Vanya and Sonechka went out into the yard. Sonechka occupied herself on the swings, while Vanya exercised on the merry-go-round. It took him a moment to notice a woman with a child in her arms, watching him. But once he laid eyes on her, he was struck frozen. Standing before him was Marinka, thin, oddly dressed, holding a little boy. "Vanya, Forgive me, she pleaded. I can no longer wander. Andriushka is hungry, and we have been roaming the streets for a month, too ashamed to face you. That's when Sonechka realized who was standing in front of her. Mommy, she said softly. The girl didn't throw herself on her mother's neck like she had imagined. Instead, she took her daddy's hand, but her eyes pleaded for understanding. Outside, it was morning, and there were no people around. But Vanya noticed that almost all the neighbors were staring at them from their windows. Some even opened their windows to listen in on their conversation. Let's go inside the apartment, Vanya suggested. There's no need to entertain the neighbors. We can talk there. Sonechka rushed to her mother when they entered the apartment. Marinka cried tears of relief, kissing and hugging her daughter. Once inside, Vanya spoke up, breaking the silence. Feed the child and put him to bed. We can talk afterwards. Marina nodded and went to the kitchen to prepare some porridge for Andrei, their 6-month-old son. Vanya observed in silence as Marina attended to their son. When Andrei was fed and peacefully fell asleep, Sonechka stayed by his side while Marina returned to the living room, taking a seat across from Ivan. Marina took a deep breath and began, Here, my husband left me. He promised me the world, but he started drinking, then he began to abuse me. And when Andrei was born, he disappeared completely. A month ago, he resurfaced with a new wife and threw us out on the street. Vanechka, I know that there is no forgiveness for me, but please, don't turn me away. I'll be like your faithful dog. I'll do whatever you say. I have nowhere else to go. My parents' apartment went to my brother, and you know he won't let me in. Vanya remained silent for a long while before finally speaking up. For now, you'll stay in the small room. We'll figure things out from here, he said. Time passed, almost imperceptibly, as Marinka slowly moved into the master bedroom. Life continued as it had before, but the family had grown. Andriushka had grown up, affectionately calling Vanya Daddy, while Sonechka started school. Ivan's mother had distanced herself from them, hurling insults at her son and Marinka, calling him a fool and her a whore. When Sonechka reached 2nd grade, Ivan discovered that his wife had once again cheated on him. It hit him like a thunderbolt. He had noticed that Marinka's interest in the children had waned over time, only becoming tense when she had to interact with them. Vanya remained silent, observing everything. Then he came home a couple of times while the children were at daycare and school. Marinka claimed she had been home all day, but he suspected otherwise. With clenched teeth, he decided to hire a private investigator. Within a week, he had acquired several photographs of Marina with her lover. Vanya returned to his yard, the darkness enveloping him. No one was around, and he found himself hesitant to go home. He simply didn't know what to do. Retrieving a bottle of whiskey from the trunk, he settled into the gazebo and began to drink. As he drank, his mind wandered through thoughts of his life. May I join you? A sudden voice startled him. In front of him stood a young woman, vaguely familiar. It was Katya, the one who had always harbored a crush on him. Please sit, Vanya responded. Why aren't you sleeping? I can't sleep. I saw you through the window and decided to come down. What are you drinking? Katya inquired. Don't ask. Vanya trailed off. It's Marinka, isn't it? You shouldn't drink too much. You might do something you'll regret, she cautioned. Yes, maybe you're right, Vanya sighed. Why are you so sad? They spent the entire night in the gazebo with Katya, reminiscing and discussing various topics. Vanya felt a sense of ease and cleanliness in her presence. However, upon returning home, he found Marinka absent. He quietly laid down on the living room sofa, not wanting to disturb her. Marinka had not left the house for a week, and Vanya's absence during the night had sobered her up a bit. She had interrogated him about his whereabouts, but Vanya simply mentioned work and avoided any arguments. Yet Vanya couldn't forget about Katya. There was something about her that Marinka lacked, an authenticity and kindness. A couple of weeks later, he returned home to find Marinka gone. Sonechka informed him that she had run away, and her grandmother had taken Andrew from the garden. Vanya felt an overwhelming sense of darkness within him. He knew exactly where Marinka had gone, but he didn't know what to do about it. As they went out to bid Marinka farewell, they unexpectedly crossed paths with Katya in the courtyard. She appeared flustered and blushed upon seeing Vanya. Unable to comprehend the situation, Vanya spontaneously suggested, "Why don't you join us at the cafe right now, Katya?" Embarrassed, Katya hesitated before defiantly replying, "Sure, let's go." The children were ecstatic and jumped with joy. At the cafe, Ivan ordered almost the entire menu, and they all had a wonderful time. Throughout the gathering, Vanya couldn't help but observe Katya closely. He observed the way she interacted with Andrew, teaching him how to eat his cake without dropping any crumbs, and answering Sonechka's questions. Moreover, he noticed how domestic and natural Katya appeared. And for some inexplicable reason, Vanya had failed to notice before just how stunningly beautiful Katya was. If Marinka's beauty was vibrant and conspicuous, Katya possessed a delicate and inner beauty. Whenever she looked at Vanya with a slight smile, he witnessed her blossom in front of him. Could it be that she still loved him? Vanya couldn't fathom such a possibility, especially since she was not married. "Katya, I apologize for prying, but do you have a husband?" "No, I have never been married." Vanya foolishly asked, "Why?" Katya felt embarrassed, and Sonia nudged him gently. "Dad, you can't ask a woman such questions." Vanya realized his mistake and wanted to apologize, but Katya had already responded, "You know why you're asking." Ivan now felt embarrassed himself, as he hadn't expected such a frank response from Katya. The rest of the evening seemed to pass by on its own. When they returned home, Marinka was already busy in the kitchen. She looked guilty, expecting an argument with Vanya, but he remained silent. He quietly went into the room and lay down on the sofa. For the next 3 days, Marinka was quiet and subdued, but on the 4th day, she started to fuss. Vanya was at home that day, so she couldn't leave during the day. He saw everything, understood everything, and observed with curiosity what would happen next. There was no stirring in his soul. It had all been burned out, as if it had never happened. When he looked at the photos of Marinka with her lover, it was as if his eyes were truly opened. He had always known, deep down, that things would turn out this way. He knew that Sonechka might not be his biological daughter, but now it didn't matter. Both Sonechka and Andriushka were his children, and he would never give them up to anyone. Ivan's thoughts of Katya grew more frequent with each passing day. He couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he had paid more attention to her back then, how their lives would have unfolded. Perhaps they would have had a full house, filled with the laughter and joy of their many children. Ivan had noticed how much Katya enjoyed taking care of the little ones, and he himself had a soft spot for kids. Sitting on the sofa, lost in his thoughts, Ivan was interrupted by his daughter, Sonia, who came to him and embraced him tightly. "Dad, Mom is really mad," Sonia said, her voice filled with worry. Ivan couldn't help but smirk. Of course she was angry. She had wanted to meet her lover, but couldn't find a way to escape her responsibilities. "Don't worry, Sonechka. Your mom's anger will pass," Ivan reassured his daughter. Sonia sighed and leaned back, reminiscing about the good old days when it was just her and Ivan. Now it was different, with Andrew in the picture. Her mom and Andrew were always arguing, creating a tense atmosphere at home. Ivan studied his daughter's face closely. How had he never considered this before? His daughter longed for the days when they lived together, just the two of them. As if on cue, Andrew started crying again. Ivan could hear Marinka's frustrated voice yelling at the little boy. Determined to bring some peace to the situation, Ivan walked into the kitchen and scooped up Andrew in his arms. He sat Andrew down, began telling him a story, and then excused himself to the kitchen. Marinka hadn't noticed him yet, so he took a step back and observed her discreetly. To his surprise, he saw her pouring something into her tea. His eyebrow raised in suspicion, he continued to watch and realized that they were pills. He silently retreated and pretended to just enter the kitchen. Marinka seemed pleased to see him. "Bo Vanechka, I was just about to come find you. Here, let's have a cup of tea." "My head is pounding today. Maybe it'll help," Marinka said, offering him the very mug containing the pills. Was she trying to poison him? No, he couldn't believe that she would go that far. But then, what was she up to? Perhaps they were sleeping pills. As Marinka turned to attend to something on the stove, he discreetly poured the tea into a nearby potted plant. "Sorry, little flower," he whispered to it silently. "I hope it's not too hot for you." Marinka looked at her mug with surprise when she turned back around. "I was really thirsty, but now I think I'll go rest. I could use some sleep," Ivan said, making his way towards the bedroom, keeping a watchful eye on Marinka's reaction. Marina's gaze held a sense of satisfaction as she glanced at him. In the darkness, Vanya laid silently, eavesdropping on the happenings in the kitchen. He could hear her phone ring, her hushed and hurried conversation, and her subsequent entrance into the room. "Vanya, Vanya," she called out, but he remained still, feigning sleep. Marina left the room, and after a minute, he heard the front door shut softly. Intrigued, Vanya rose from his bed and approached the window. There, he witnessed Marina stepping into a taxi. That was it. He had limited time now to proceed with his plans. With utmost caution, careful not to disturb the sleeping children, Vanya packed Marina's belongings. He placed 2 suitcases and a bag near the landing, strategically positioning her passport on top. Within the passport, he carefully slid in the photos provided by the detective. Satisfied with his preparations, he returned to his bed, oddly finding sleep quickly. But his slumber was abruptly interrupted by the doorbell. Vanya swiftly rose, opened the door, and found Marina standing on the threshold, her eyes filled with fear. "Vanya, I'll explain everything, please. I love you so much. It was a mistake, just a mistake," Marina pleaded. "Don't disturb the kids by making calls, and do me a favor, don't obstruct me anymore," Vanya asserted firmly before shutting the door on Marina. She stood outside, staring at the closed door, filled with a hollow terror. Where could she go now? What should she do? She knew all too well that Vanya's calm and composed demeanor was only temporary. Deciding she needed to give him time to cool down and miss her, Marina resolved to find a solution on her own. She dialed her lover's number. "Hello, my husband kicked me out." "I'll come to you," she said urgently. "Are you insane? Why would I want you here? My wife is returning in 2 days. Solve your own problems," her lover responded coldly. The phone beeped repeatedly, catching Marina's attention. However, the meaning of the beeps eluded her. Amidst the confusion, she heard him professing his love, assuring her that he only wanted to be with her. After enduring 3 agonizing months in a rented room, Marina had decided that enough was enough. It was time to confront Vanya. It was time to stop forgiving and missing him. But as Marina stood on his doorstep, she was denied entry by her brother. Ever since their youth, he had felt slighted when Marina convinced their grandmother to transfer the apartment to her, only to sell it in secret and squander the proceeds. He warned her not to come back, not to hold on to any hope. Consequently, Marina had to borrow money from her friends and find a place to rent. Finding employment was not even a consideration for her, as Vanya would always support the family himself. But now, with no more money left, it was time to return to their cozy family nest. As Marina approached the house, she noticed that Vanya's car was absent. Perhaps this was for the best. She envisioned making a delicious meal, cleaning up the place, which was likely covered in dust, and Vanya would return in the evening, apologizing for his actions. However, when she attempted to open the door, she discovered that her key no longer fit. This was unexpected. Could Vanya have gone as far as changing the locks? Marina seethed with anger. Well, it didn't matter. As soon as she sorted out this lock, she would make everything right. Marina called and knocked on the door repeatedly, but no one answered. Eventually, she heard the creak of a neighboring door. "Marinka, what are you doing here?" her neighbor inquired. "Where is Vanya, do you know?" Marina asked in desperation. "I know. He went to the seaside for a vacation," came the response. "The seaside?" Marina seethed with anger, her mind consumed by thoughts of her ex-husband Vanya being at sea, while their children were with him and his new wife. The neighbor abruptly closed the door, not interested in answering Marina's questions. The sight of the woman's twisted face only fueled Marina's dislike for her, as she had always felt sorry for Vanya. Marina found herself rooted in place, unable to move. Just who did Vanya think he was, bringing the new wife into the picture? He would regret it when he returned, Marina vowed to herself. Then, a brilliant idea came to Marina. She decided that she should report Vanya to the police for kidnapping their children, since they were officially divorced and he had taken them without her consent. But first, she needed to talk to Vanya's mother and have her call him. Marina would give him an ultimatum: return and ask for forgiveness, or else she would file a report. Determined, Marina made her way to Vanya's mother's house and knocked on the door. When the woman answered, Marina wasted no time. "I need to talk to you," Marina stated firmly. "There's nothing to talk about," Vanya's mother replied coldly. "I will file a report on Vanya. I'll call the police because he took the kids without my knowledge," Marina declared resolutely. Vanya's mother scoffed, unimpressed. "Well, call them then." Marina refused to back down. "I will, and I'll make sure they look into it." Vanya's mother challenged her once again. "Well, call them then. I'll see what happens." Determined to protect her children, Marina would indeed follow through with her plan. Marina gripped the phone tightly as tears streamed down her face. Her husband had taken their children, and his mother was complicit in the act. Ivan's mother observed Marina with curiosity before speaking up. "Well, come inside. Why were you waiting for the police at the door?" she said calmly. Confused by her seemingly nonchalant behavior, Marina complied and entered the house. It wasn't long before the police arrived. Marina couldn't help but cry, but she forced herself to stop by pinching herself painfully. They took her statement and then turned their attention to Ivan's mother. "Why are you helping to hide the children?" they questioned. "Hide them from whom? Her?" Ivan's mother replied. "Nobody is hiding them. Vanya, my son, went on vacation with his wife and children. And this woman, his ex-wife, had her parental rights revoked 2 weeks ago." She handed over her documents to the police officers, who carefully examined them before turning back to Marina, who stared at everything with wide, bewildered eyes. "Why are you behaving like this, woman?" one of the officers asked sternly. "You abandoned your children, and now you're causing a commotion." "But I was deprived," Marina managed to mutter, her voice trembling. "Well, we've sent you multiple letters since you were evicted from your previous address. You never responded," another officer interjected. "We have statements from neighbors and even private investigators to support that claim. I won't let this go. They planned everything. They'll be begging me for mercy," Marina exclaimed, her voice filled with desperation. "And how am I supposed to survive now?" Vanya's mother cast a cold glance at Marina and spoke sharply. "You deserve this, you despicable person. People work to make a living, something you clearly don't understand. Is that what you lacked? Vanya does everything for you." The police officers escorted her out of the apartment, cautioning her that if there was a next time, they would take her to the station. Marina pulled her arm away and walked off, contemplating the need for a plan to bring Ivan back. Along the way, she stopped at a pawn shop to trade in the earrings Ivan had given her long ago. The money she received would be enough to cover a room and some food. Nothing extravagant, just enough to sustain her while she waited. Marina visited Ivan's house every day, patiently waiting in the yard for hours. Finally, on the third hour, she spotted his car entering the yard. Marina quickly fixed her hair and stood up to greet him. Ivan was the first to step out of the car, assisting Katerina out. There was something familiar about her, Marina thought. Ah, yes, she was from this neighborhood. She had changed so much, Marina almost didn't recognize her. She was glowing. Then the children came out. Sonia immediately noticed Marina and retreated behind her father. Marina smiled, and the little girl tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, look," she whispered. Ivan turned around, his eyes narrowing in anger. He walked towards Marina, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind a nearby bush before Andrei could spot her. Katerina saw the look on Ivan's face, promptly telling Sonia to take her brother home and hurrying after her husband. Ivan was livid. He rarely lost his temper, but this was one of those rare occasions. "I told you not to show your face," he seethed. "I'm here for the kids," Marina replied defiantly. "You never cared about those children. Now that you're at a loss, you suddenly remember them." Ivan tightened his grip on her hand, his anger evident. Just then, Katya arrived, running towards them. "Vanetka, let it go. Let's go," she pleaded, trying to calm him down. And then Marinka became overwhelmed with emotions. She quickly pulled her arm away from Vanya and lunged at Katya, clawing at her hair and scratching her. Vanya struggled to separate Marinka from his wife and pushed her aside. Just then, the children ran up to them, worriedly hugging Katya and asking if she was hurt. Katya tried to reassure them, sitting on the ground. "No, my darlings, it's okay. It's just a scratch," she said, her cheek bleeding. Marinka watched this scene with hatred and then spoke up. "Samechka, Andriusha, come to me. I'm your mother. I missed you," she pleaded. However, the children remained motionless, not even looking at her. Marinka's frustration grew, causing her to raise her voice. "I said, quickly leave that woman and come to your mother. Do you hear me?" she demanded. Sonia turned to her and uttered harshly, "Go away. Don't touch our Katya. Go away." "What are you saying to your mom? You disrespectful girl. You haven't had enough from me," Marinka snapped. "Andrew, come to your mom. He's not even your real dad." That's when Vanya reached his breaking point. He turned towards Marinka and sternly warned her, "I'm giving you 2 minutes. If you're still here after those 2 minutes, I promise you'll regret it." Marinka recoiled from his gaze, then took a step towards him and hissed, "You'll be sorry." In the evening, the entire family gathered in the kitchen, including Grandma who hadn't seen them in a while. The children excitedly presented her with seashells from their trip to the beach and small gifts they had purchased from street vendors. They avoided discussing the events of the day and instead shared their fascination with the sea, its waves, and the warm sunshine. Grandma listened attentively, offering a warm smile. As darkness settled outside, it was time to head home. Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the street and lights illuminated the scene. Everyone rushed to the window to see Ivan's car engulfed in flames. Concerned neighbors promptly moved their own vehicles away, but those parked nearby became victims of the fire as well. In the midst of the chaos, Katya urgently exclaimed, "Why are you just standing there?" One neighbor replied, resigned, "What can I do? There's nothing left to save." "Was it her?" Another neighbor questioned. "I suspect so. I have insurance. I can forgive it. But what about the neighbors?" "We installed a camera at the entrance a month ago, mainly to monitor cars." Meanwhile, Marinka celebrated her recent success. With the last of her money, she had purchased a bottle of champagne. Sitting on the sofa, she popped open the bottle, took a drink right from the neck, and reveled in her achievement. This was only the beginning. She was already brainstorming her next venture. Just as she started to feel a sense of contentment, the doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Curiously, she answered it and was greeted by 2 policemen. "What can I do for you?" Marinka inquired. "We're here to apprehend you," one of the policemen sternly replied. "Apprehend me? What's the matter?" Marinka asked, puzzled by the unexpected turn of events. "Well, in case you weren't aware, it's illegal to set cars on fire," the other policeman stated matter-of-factly. Confused, Marinka quickly defended herself. "I didn't burn anything. It was her, she set it on fire herself. What's happening?" Marinka's confidence wavered. She couldn't bear the thought of going to prison for something she didn't do. She had been deceived, thrown out of her own home, but nobody seemed to listen to her pleas. In the midst of her desperation, Marinka's attempts to defend herself only resulted in being handcuffed and warned that her sentence would be even harsher now. A year later, Katya and Ivan welcomed their daughter into the world. Sonia observed the newborn with care as she was brought home from the hospital. Andriushka, being the older sibling, took it upon himself to be protective and playful with the new addition to their family. "Now you're not the youngest anymore, which means you have to look out for her and have fun together," Sonia explained to Andriushka. After a moment of contemplation, Andriushka grinned mischievously, demonstrating his desire to be a playful big brother. He responded, "All right, I'll protect her." Laughter filled the room as everyone acknowledged Andriushka's commitment to being a loving and protective older sibling.